now we are going to sew in the invisible zip. Now undo the zip and roll the left side of the zip over onto the seam allowance so you have the right sides together of the zip and the dress. The tape on the top of the zip should sit at the edge of your neck edge. That's why the zip tape sits above where the zip closes. It's a good guide for you to use. Roll out the teeth of the zip. You will have the zipper foot on the left edge of the zipper teeth so you can stitch up against the teeth with the tape rolled out. If you have an invisible zip machine foot, use that, but you can also use an ordinary zipper foot. If you have an invisible machine foot, it will sit over the teeth and automatically roll the teeth out for you. Now stitch all the way down this edge, making sure the waist seam faces up towards the bodice. Stitch until you can sew no further. Now do the zip up and place a pin at the waist seam on the other side of the zip tape. This will allow you to match the waist seam of the other side of the zip when you pin it into position. Undo the zip, being careful not to dislodge this pin, and roll the right side of the zip onto the right side of the remaining seam. Match the tape at the neck edge as you did before. Check that the pin at the waistline is matching the waistline of the dress and stitch as you did for the first side of the zip. Again, make sure the waist seam is facing up towards the bodice. Don't worry if you don't finish stitching exactly opposite where you finished on the first side. As long as they are close, that's fine. Do the zip up and check that your waist seams and neckline are matching. Now to finish off the bottom of the zip. Put the right sides of the seam allowance together and pin at the bottom of the stitching of the zip. Make sure that you match both sides and start from where the highest point of the stitching finished if the stitching hasn't matched perfectly. You will still need to use your zipper foot so you can stitch up against the zip. Make sure you reinforce the beginning and the end of this stitching line. Stitch on the seam allowance line all the way through to the hem. Pat yourself on the back. Now we are up to sewing in the lining. With right sides together, pin and stitch the lining to the neck edge and all the way down the zip. Make sure you turn the seam allowance of the lining up at the waistline. Check when you turn it through to the right side that your neck edges match. You may need to use your zipper foot to stitch along the zip edge. Don't sew too close though, as you will run into trouble by catching the lining in the zip when you are doing the zip up. Trim the neck edge seam allowance back by at least half. Pull the lining open at the neck edge so you can edge stitch like you did on the edge of the peplum. You may find it easier to do this step before you stitch the lining to the zip. Press this area. Now with the lining and the bodice sitting as they will when your dress is finished, take the shoulder and armhole edges and turn the seam allowances in towards each other. Just imagine how the lining will sit when your dress is finished. Pin this seam right on the very edge, just at the shoulder seam. This holds it in place until you turn it through to stitch the armhole to the lining. If you don't do this, you can end up twisting the lining. Make sure the rest of the armhole fits by pinning at the underarm seam and checking. Now put your hand up between the dress and the lining and grab the seam allowance you have pinned at the shoulder armhole edge. Pull this out towards you. Holding the seam allowance, you will be able to remove the pin and reposition it with the right side of the dress and the lining together. Now go to the machine and stitch all the way around the armhole, matching your underarm seams. Pull this out so you have the right sides together and check that all is okay, and if it is, go back inside and trim the seam allowance by at least half. Repeat this step with the other armhole. Go to the iron and press this completed neck and armhole section. Turn the seam allowance of the lining up at the waist and pin it onto the bodice. Hand stitch this into place. Neaten the hem by zigzagging or overlocking. Pin up into position. I have stitched this hem by hand, but you could machine it up. It all depends on the finish you are after. Well done.